Brothers and sisters in Islam, let me begin with a question. Have you ever seen a person whose heart is soft, whose tongue is gentle, whose hands are always ready to help, yet that very person is the one people take advantage of the most? This is the reality of our time. Kindness is no longer valued. It is often exploited. And today I want to remind myself and all of you, Islam teaches us kindness, but Islam also teaches us wisdom. Rasulullah was the most merciful, the most generous, the most forgiving. Yet his kindness was never a weakness. He forgave when forgiveness brought hearts closer to Allah, but he stood firm when firmness was needed for justice. Kindness is one of the most beautiful qualities that a believer can possess. It is a reflection of the mercy of Allah that is placed in the hearts of His servants, and it is a characteristic that the Prophet Muhammad embodied throughout his life. However, kindness in Islam is never meant to be a form of weakness or helpless. It is not a license for others to exploit, manipulate, or harm the one who is showing it. Instead, kindness in its true Islamic form is an act of strength, done for the sake of Allah, balanced with wisdom, justice, and dignity. When people assume that kindness equals weakness, they misunderstand both the gift and the responsibility that Allah has given. A kind person is not someone who simply surrenders to the desires of others or allows themselves to be walked over. Rather, a kind person is one who chooses mercy even when they have the power to retaliate, one who gives even when they could withhold, and one who forgives even when revenge is within reach. This choice is what makes kindness powerful, because it comes from a position of control and strength, not from fear or helplessness. Take the example of Rasulullah. He was described as a mercy to all the worlds by Allah Himself, yet he was also the strongest of men in character, in leadership, and in principles. He never allowed his kindness to compromise justice. He forgave the people of Makkah when he entered as a victorious leader, though they had once driven him out and persecuted his companions. That forgiveness was not weakness, it was a strategic kindness that won over their hearts and established Islam. At the same time, when boundaries were crossed and justice was at stake, the Prophet ﷺ was firm. His kindness was not blind or exploitable, but guided by divine wisdom. This balance is what Muslims today need to understand. Many times people confuse being kind with being. They think that saying yes to every demand, tolerating every injustice, or remaining silent in the face of oppression is an act of kindness. In reality, this is harmful both to oneself and to others. A believer is commanded to protect their dignity, their faith, and their right. If kindness leads to humiliation, abuse, or enabling of wrongdoing, then that is not the Islamic way. True kindness is rooted in self-respect and in recognition of the limits that Allah has set. When you are kind in the right way, you become a source of goodness, inspiration, and comfort for others. But when you allow your kindness to be misused, you not only harm yourself, but also encourage bad behavior in those who take advantage. The oppressor learns that he can continue oppressing without consequence. The manipulator learns that he can keep exploiting, and the unjust feel emboldened to carry on. In this way, the misuse of kindness does not just harm the individual, it weakens society as a whole. This is why the Prophet ﷺ emphasized strength along with mercy. He said, the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah than the weak believer. While there is good in both, strength here does not only mean physical power, but strength of character, of will, and of standing firm upon the truth. A strong believer shows kindness without being exploited, forgives without being humiliated, and gives without losing their self-respect. Therefore, kindness in Islam must always be paired with wisdom. It is an act of intention, not compulsion. It is given for the sake of Allah, not out of fear of people. It is expressed in a way that benefits, uplifts, and heals, not in a way that enables harm or injustice. This is why kindness is never weakness. It is in fact one of the greatest strengths a believer believer can have. The life of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ is the greatest example of balance between mercy and justice. He was the embodiment of mercy, as Allah described him in the Quran. And we have not sent you, O Muhammad, except as a mercy to the worlds. 21:7. Yet this mercy never blinded him to the demands of justice. He showed forgiveness where it healed and softened hearts, and he exercised firmness when injustice threatened the community or when the rights of Allah and His servants were being violated. This perfect balance is a lesson for every Muslim who wishes to live by the Islamic way of kindness. One of the clearest examples of his mercy was the conquest of Makkah. After years of persecution, exile and battles against the Quraysh, the Prophet ﷺ returned to Makkah as a victorious leader. He had every right by worldly standards to seek revenge for the wrongs done to him and his followers. Instead, he forgave them, saying, "Go, for you are free." This act of mercy melted the hearts of his enemies and transformed many of them into devoted Muslims. It was not weakness that guided his decision, but wisdom. He knew that mercy at that moment would open doors for faith, reconciliation, and the strengthening of Islam. At the same time, there were occasions when his firmness was necessary. When hypocrites or traitors endangered the safety of the Muslim community, he did not allow mercy to compromise justice. For instance, during battles, he upheld discipline and ensured accountability. When individuals broke treaties or betrayed trust, consequences were enforced. His justice was not driven by personal anger, but by the responsibility of protecting the rights of the believers and upholding the commands of Allah. This shows that mercy without justice becomes chaos, and justice without mercy becomes cruelty. The Prophet ﷺ embodied both, perfectly balanced. This balance also appeared in his dealings at the personal level. With children, he was tender, playing with them and showing affection. With the poor, he gave generously and treated them with dignity. With his companions, he was patient, forgiving mistakes and correcting them with gentleness. Yet when it came to matters of faith, he did not compromise. If someone tried to distort the teachings of Islam or cross the limit set by Allah, he stood firm. His mercy was guided by principles, not emotions alone. This balance teaches Muslims an important lesson in their daily life. There are times when mercy is the best option, such as forgiving a brother who wronged you or overlooking the mistake of a friend. But there are also times when firmness is required, such as stopping oppression, refusing to tolerate abuse, or upholding the rules of fairness in business and family matters. If one leans too much on mercy, people may misuse. If one leans too much on justice without compassion, people may turn away from guidance. The Islamic way is always moderation. The Prophet ﷺ demonstrated that real kindness is not about always saying yes or allowing others to walk over you. Real kindness is being merciful in a way that benefits people and being firm in a way that protects truth and justice. His example reminds us that mercy and justice are not opposites but complementary forces. Together they form the foundation of a healthy society where hearts are softened, yet wrongdoing is not tolerated. For Muslims today, following this prophetic balance means being forgiving without being exploited, being generous without being manipulated, and being strong without being harsh. It means remembering that mercy opens hearts, but justice preserves dignity and order. By practicing both, as the Prophet ﷺ did, one can embody the true beauty of Islam and prevent kindness from being misused or misunderstood. The Quran provides clear guidance that kindness and justice must always walk together, never separated, never in conflict. Allah says in Surah Al-Ma'idah, verse 8, "Do not let the hatred of a people prevent you from being just. Be just, that is nearer to righteousness." This verse teaches us that no matter the situation, justice cannot be compromised, even when our emotions push us towards mercy or towards anger. In Islam, justice is not cold or cruel. It is the foundation upon which true mercy can exist. Kindness without justice can become harmful, and justice without kindness can become oppressive. The balance of the two is what makes the Islamic way so complete and unique. When kindness ignores justice, it often leads to enabling wrong behavior. Imagine a person who keeps forgiving someone who repeatedly cheats, lies, or oppresses. If forgiveness continues without accountability, the wrongdoer feels empowered to continue harming. What looks like kindness actually becomes injustice, both to the victim and to the community. Islam teaches us that forgiveness is noble, but it is not always the right choice if it allows harm to spread. In such cases, standing firm with justice is not cruelty, it is mercy in disguise, because it protects the larger society from corruption. The Prophet Muhammad himself applied this principle. He forgave when forgiveness led to guidance, but he applied justice when people's actions endangered the community. When a thief was caught stealing, for example, he did not allow mercy to override the command of Allah regarding punishment, because applying justice served as a deterrent and preserved the safety of society. At the same time, he encouraged compassion within justice by making sure people's needs were met so that no one was driven to steal out of hunger or desperation. This balance shows us that justice in Islam is not detached from kindness, but informed by kindness is an act of the heart, while justice is an act of principle. Both must work together to create harmony. A parent who loves their child knows that kindness sometimes means being gentle, but justice sometimes means disciplining them when they go astray. A leader who cares for their people knows that kindness means providing for their needs, but justice means preventing corruption, even if it requires punishment. In both cases, kindness without justice would spoil character, while justice without kindness would harden heart. The Qur'anic command ensures that Muslims do not fall into either extreme. In our modern lives, this principle is especially important. Many people confuse tolerance with kindness, allowing harmful behaviors or unjust practices to continue because they fear conflict or want to appear merciful. But Islam does not support blind tolerance. It teaches us to be gentle in approach, yet firm on principles. Standing up to injustice is itself a form of kindness, because it protects the weak and prevents the strong from abusing their power. If everyone excused oppression in the name of kindness, society would collapse into chaos. At the same time, justice in Islam is not harshness for the sake of power. The Qur'an and Sunnah repeatedly emphasize mercy, forgiveness, and giving people opportunities to change. The Prophet ﷺ often chose the path of leniency when it was beneficial, but never at the cost of violating the limits set by Allah. This shows that justice itself can be a form of mercy when applied correctly. Therefore, the Quranic principle of balance teaches that kindness must never make us blind to wrongdoing, and justice must never strip away compassion. Together, they guide us to act in ways that benefit individuals and society without allowing harm to flourish. This balance is what keeps kindness from being misused and justice from being abused. For a believer, living by this principle means knowing when to forgive and when to stand firm, when to be soft and when to be strong, and always keeping Allah's pleasure as the ultimate goal.
When kindness is misused, it does not only affect the individual who shows it, but it creates ripples of harm that extend into families, communities, and entire societies. Kindness is meant to be a force that uplifts, heals, and softens hearts. But when people take advantage of kindness, its purpose is twisted, and what was supposed to be a source of blessing can turn into a doorway for oppression. Misusing kindness can empower wrongdoers, weaken the resolve of the righteous, and normalize injustice until it becomes widespread and accepted. At an individual level, when someone constantly gives in the name of kindness without setting boundaries, they often end up exhausted, drained, and resentful. Instead of kindness being a noble act of worship, it turns into a burden that breaks their spirit. This is not the way Islam teaches us to live. Allah does not command believers to destroy themselves through excessive sacrifice. Instead, He teaches balance, reminding us that we have rights upon ourselves, our families, and our community. A kindness that leaves a person humiliated, stripped of self-respect, or unable to fulfill their own duties is not true kindness. It is a kindness that has been misused by others. On a broader level, when kindness is taken advantage of, it allows oppressors to thrive. For example, if a corrupt leader is continually excused in the name of mercy, he will continue to abuse his power. If an abuser in a family is constantly forgiven without being held accountable, the abuse will only increase. In both cases, the person showing kindness may believe they are acting out of patience or forgiveness, but in reality they are enabling injustice to grow. This creates a dangerous environment where wrongdoers, feel emboldened, and victims lose hope of ever finding justice. The Prophet Muhammad SAW warned against such situations by teaching that a believer is not stung from the same hole twice. This hadith shows us that while a Muslim may forgive, they are not meant to remain naive or allow themselves to be repeatedly harmed in the same way. Forgiveness does not mean putting oneself back into a situation where the harm will continue. Misusing kindness in this way turns a noble act into an opportunity for others to exploit, and that is against the spirit of Islam. Communities also suffer when kindness is misused. If people continually overlook corruption, dishonesty, or injustice in the name of being kind or merciful, the entire moral fabric of the society begins to unravel, wrong becomes normalized, and those who try to uphold truth are silenced or mocked. Over time, a culture of silence develops where people no longer stand against oppression because they confuse passivity with kindness. In reality, this silence is harmful to everyone because injustice spreads like a disease that eventually consumes even those who once thought they were safe from it. True kindness in Islam always considers the bigger picture. Sometimes kindness is shown through gentle forgiveness, and sometimes it is shown through standing up firmly against oppression so that others are protected. Allowing someone to misuse kindness is harmful both to the victim and to the wrongdoer because it allows the wrongdoer to persist in sin and oppression without correction. Protecting them from that sin by stopping them is in itself an act of mercy. The balance that Islam teaches prevents kindness from becoming a weakness. It ensures that kindness remains a tool for building strong individuals and just societies. When kindness is misused, it loses its power to heal and instead becomes a weapon in the hands of the unjust. This is why every believer must learn to pair kindness with wisdom and justice, so that their compassion uplifts rather than enables harm. By doing so, kindness retains its beauty, its strength, and its true purpose as an act of worship that pleases Allah and protects His creation. True kindness in Islam is never random or blind. It is guided by wisdom. A believer does not simply act out of emotion, giving or forgiving without thought of the consequences. Instead, Islam teaches that kindness must be exercised with understanding, balance, and foresight. Wisdom, or hikmah, is the ability to place things in their proper place, to know when to act with softness and when to act with firmness. Without wisdom, kindness can easily be misused, misunderstood, or even turned into a tool of harm rather than good. The Prophet Muhammad SAW demonstrated this principle in many situations. He was the most merciful of people, yet he never allowed his mercy to become naive or foolish. When people came to him with requests, he often granted them, but sometimes he refused if he knew that fulfilling their request would harm them or others. For example, he forgave enemies when it opened their hearts to Islam, but he confronted those whose actions posed a threat to the safety of the community. His kindness was always guided by divine wisdom, showing us that mercy without limits can become destructive, while mercy with wisdom becomes transformative. Wisdom in kindness also means recognizing that sometimes the best kindness is to say no. Parents, for instance, may love their children deeply, but they understand that giving in to every demand would spoil them and harm their character. Saying no in those moments is not cruelty but an act of kindness rooted in wisdom, because it prepares the child for a better future. Similarly, when a friend or relative continuously takes advantage of someone's generosity, wisdom teaches that setting boundaries is more beneficial than endlessly giving in. The refusal is itself a form of kindness because it prevents the person from falling deeper into greed, selfishness, or exploitation. In relationships, wisdom allows kindness to flourish without imbalance. A spouse who is kind but lacks wisdom may overlook harmful behaviors until resentment builds and the marriage is damaged. A spouse who is kind with wisdom knows when to be patient, when to forgive, and when to address problems firmly but fairly. This balance keeps love alive while protecting the dignity of both partners. It is a reminder that kindness without wisdom can weaken relationships, while kindness with wisdom strengthens them. On a societal level, wisdom ensures that kindness does not enable injustice. If leaders show mercy to criminals without accountability, society will suffer. If communities tolerate corruption out of misplaced kindness, injustice will grow. True kindness requires wisdom to differentiate between the person who needs compassion and the situation that requires firmness. This was the practice of the Prophet ﷺ, who could be seen weeping with the poor one day and standing unshaken in front of oppressors the next. Both actions were acts of kindness, but each was shaped by the wisdom of the moment. The Quran praises those who combine mercy with wisdom. Allah describes the servants of the Most Merciful as those who are humble, forgiving and patient, yet also firm against evil and protective of justice. This shows that kindness is not about ignoring wrongs but about addressing them in the right way, at the right time with the right intention. Wisdom transforms kindness into a force that benefits everyone, not just the one being directly shown compassion. For the believer, developing this kind of wisdom requires seeking knowledge, reflecting on the Sunnah and asking Allah for guidance. It means pausing before acting, considering the short-term and long-term effects of an action, and ensuring that kindness never contradicts justice. Without wisdom, kindness can be wasted or misused. With wisdom, kindness becomes a light that guides hearts, heals wounds and brings people closer to Allah. In the end, kindness without wisdom is like water without direction. It may overflow and cause damage, but kindness with wisdom is like a flowing river, nourishing everything along its path. This is the Islamic way, where kindness is always controlled, intentional, and beneficial, ensuring that mercy uplifts without enabling harm and always remains a strength in the life of a believer. The Prophet Muhammad ﷺ taught that the strong believer is better and more beloved to Allah than the weak believer, while there is good in both. This hadith carries a deep lesson about the balance between strength, wisdom and kindness. Strength in Islam is not only measured by physical power but also by strength of faith, strength of character and strength of will. A strong believer is one who can control their desires, stand firm upon truth, and use their strength to benefit others without allowing themselves to be misused. At the same time, this strength must be guided by wisdom, so that it does not turn into arrogance or harshness. Being strong means having the courage to uphold justice, even when it is difficult. Many people confuse strength with aggression, but in Islam, strength is defined by self-control and resilience. The Prophet ﷺ said that the strong person is not the one who can wrestle others to the ground, but the one who can control themselves when angry. This shows that true strength is found in discipline and patience, not in overpowering others. A believer who embodies this strength becomes a source of stability for their family, community and society. Their kindness is not seen as weakness because it is backed by a firm sense of dignity and self-respect. Wisdom is the companion of strength. A believer may have the ability to act, but without wisdom, their actions may cause more harm than good. For example, speaking out against injustice is necessary, but wisdom ensures that it is done in the right way, at the right time, and with the right words. A strong and wise believer knows when to remain silent to avoid unnecessary conflict, and when to speak firmly to prevent harm. Their strength is not wasted on pride or impulse but channeled toward what pleases Allah and benefits others. In daily life, the strong and wise believer shows balance in all dealing. At home they protect and provide for their family with love, but they also set boundaries and guide with firmness. At work or in society, they show kindness to colleagues and neighbors, but they do not allow exploitation or injustice to continue unchecked. In worship they strive with discipline, pushing themselves to fulfill obligations and go beyond them, but they are also wise enough to avoid excess or actions that burn them out. This balance of strength and wisdom creates a believer who is consistent, reliable, and respected by others. Without strength, kindness can be exploited. Without wisdom, strength can become destructive. The believer must hold both qualities together. This is why the companions of the Prophet ﷺ were so effective in spreading Islam. They were men and women of deep compassion, known for generosity and gentleness, but they were also firm in faith, unshaken in trials, and courageous in defending truth. Their strength made their kindness valuable, because it was a choice, not a weakness. Their wisdom made their strength beneficial because it was directed in ways that served Allah's cause rather than their own egos. For Muslims today, this lesson is crucial. A believer who is strong and wise can navigate the challenges of modern life without losing their value. They can show mercy to those in need while standing against injustice. They can forgive when forgiveness leads to reconciliation but hold firm when forgiveness would only enable harm. This makes them a source of balance in a world that often swings between extremes of harshness and weakness. Ultimately, the believer must aim to be strong in faith, strong in patience, strong in resisting temptation, and strong in serving others, while always guided by the wisdom of the Qur'an and Sunnah. Such a believer is beloved to Allah because they embody the balance that Islam calls for: strength without cruelty, kindness without weakness, and wisdom that ties them together. This is the path to becoming a believer whose presence brings stability, whose actions bring benefit, and whose life reflects the beauty of living by the Islamic way.